Thank you very much, Yossi. Next to address the achievements and challenges of Zionism over the last 100 years, Dr. Tal Beker is a fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute, an international associate at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. From 2006 to 2009, he served as senior policy advisor at Israel's Minister of Foreign Affairs, and he was a lead negotiator in Israeli-Palestinian negotiators during the Annapolis peace process. He's represented Israel in a wide variety of bilateral and multilateral negotiations and served as director of the International Law Department at the Israeli Foreign Ministry, counsel to Israel's UN mission in New York, and international law expert in the Military Advocate General's Corps of the Israel Defense Forces. Dr. Beker holds a doctorate from Columbia. His book, Terrorism and the State, Rethinking the Rules of State Responsibility, is the recipient of the 2007 Guggenheim Prize for Best International Law Book. We're thrilled to have him with us. Please welcome Dr. Tal Beker.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, pleasure to be with the Schaefer family, and in a way, real inspiration to be here too, so I thank you for the opportunity. 7 minutes, so let's go. My daughter Shira is 10 years old, and in my garden, I live in Arnona near the Tayelet, for those of you who have been there and seen the view. And I have a garden, and if you kind of tilt your head to the very side and look through the corner between some houses, you can actually see the Temple Mount. And we were lying in a hammock at precisely that point in the garden, and I asked her what she had been studying at school. And she said she had been studying Akedat Yitzchak, the Binding of Isaac. I thought to myself, 10 years old, Binding of Isaac, not sure I would have made that choice as an educator, but that's okay. And I asked her, do you know where the Binding of Isaac took place? And she looks at me like I'm a total idiot. She, just absolute disdain, and she goes, yeah, there. And she just points with her finger to Har HaBayit through the gap in the other apartments around us. And I had this shiver going through my spine when she did that, because I thought, my grandparents from Warsaw, my grandfather had 4 sisters, my grandmother had 12 brothers and sisters, all of them murdered in the Holocaust. They were the only survivors. And here their great-grandchild is pointing to the Temple Mount and looking at her father like he's an idiot, because he doesn't know that that's where it happened, and that's why he's asking her. And I really had this sense of what an absolute miracle the Zionist story is. That a people 3,500 years old are able, through all its trials and tribulations, to come back and realize their rights to self-determination. But I guess what bothered me a little bit was, even though it's an incredible miracle for me, I'm not sure it's such a miracle for her. She kind of thought that I was a basic idiot. It's pretty much taken for granted. And then I thought, it's not even a miracle for me all the time. And most of the time, I'm actually feeling pretty conflicted about it myself. And I started to think, for all the amazing achievements, and they really are historic, I don't think they have a parallel in terms of our ability to realize our sovereignty in our ancient homeland. How come I don't feel that in Australia we say crash hot about it anymore? How come I don't feel so good about it most of the time? How come the propaganda doesn't work on me? Right? I actually have been involved sometimes in drafting it in the earlier stages of my career. I look at that stuff now and I think, oh, my daughter's right, I really am an idiot. How come so often I open the newspaper and I get depressed? I feel pessimistic. And I sometimes feel like what's happening in the Israeli debate and in different parties in Israel trying to achieve power in Israel is who is going to be in power in order to manage the erosion of this wonderful idea. What is the pace that the erosion is going to take place? When I wake up in the morning, I don't know if you have the same feeling, but when I read a story about Hadarat Nashim, or what happened recently about the exclusion of women from the public space, or acts of discrimination and so on and so forth, a whole bunch of different stories I could tell, the wind is taken out of my sails. And it's not because I don't know how to defend Israel in the public audience. I know how to make the talking points. I know how to compare Israel to other countries. I actually just don't care about that stuff. I'm not interested in whether we're better than France or Syria or Turkey. I don't care. I care if the listener, the audience, it's my job to make them care. But what I care is the society that I live in. And I wanted to mention briefly 4 things that occur to me why, if any of you share this feeling, why it's sometimes hard just to be happy about this miracle. I think the first is that even though, in a sense, and Yoav said this beautifully, I thought, in a sense, Zionism has achieved its objective. It established a state for the Jewish people in its homeland. You read, it's one of the few political platforms that have ever achieved their objectives as far as I remember. You read the 1897 Basel Convention, word for word, I think we did it. The problem, I think, is for so many of us, the crisis remains. We still feel like we're battling for our survival. So much so that when you listen to the way we talk, and I'll say something a little bit controversial, it sometimes sounds like Israel is the biggest diaspora community in the world. Because it seems to be the one where the most serious focus on how precarious our existence is takes place. Everything is temporary. We use the word existential threat, according to my estimates, about every 3 seconds. It's almost as if, I wrote this recently, it's almost as if we've defined Israel as the place where we created Israel so that we could concentrate Jewish anxiety in one location. And those threats are real, and they tire us out. They're tiring, because every morning you wake up and you see them and you hear them. You can be naive and dismiss them, but that is naive. But it still makes you feel like, well, if we achieved it, why is it still such hard work? The second thing I would say is that to some extent in the battle in Zionism between the political Zionists, for those who know, who particularly, there's a lot more nuance in this than I'm giving credit to, created Israel as a place of refuge. And those who are more like a Chada'am, who saw it as a spiritual center, in essence, partly because of the short things that Yossi mentioned, that the political Zionists kind of set the tone. We earned the right to be normal. But being normal is boring. Being normal is boring. You have, and sometimes we don't even do the normal all that well. We have a system of government where a prime minister looks around his cabinet table, and I'm not talking about this particular government, just to be clear, any government. The prime minister looks around the table and he's not sure whether about 50% of the people, about 50% of the time, are thinking about how to ensure that he fails. It's very hard to run a country like that, even normally. The third area, which I think makes this a miraculous achievement still feel a little bit weighed down for us, is that I think we've got the Jewish part of this state pretty wrong. We've got it very shallow. We understand our Jewishness essentially to go around this idea. We have a Jewish majority, we have a state that can protect the Jewish people, we have Jewish public symbols, Shabbat, menorah, and so on. Those are all very important things. But if that's the be-all and end-all of being a Jewish state, what am I here for? And the fourth thing, just to mention briefly, kind of ties all these things together, I think. And that is the idea of what our aspiration is. If you connected to the guiding narrative of the Zionist movement, I think, of the establishment of the state, which was political Zionism, then the great achievement of Zionism was the establishment of the state. That means the job of every generation after that is to protect what we achieved before. We are Dor HaNoflim, the fallen generation. We look back to our founding fathers in awe, and we say, well, they did the really cool thing, they established the state, and our job is to wake up every morning and ask, who is threatening it? How do you get people, young people in particular, how do I get Shira, my daughter, my 10-year-old, for that to be the driving force in her life? A people are as great as their next aspiration. A country, a state, is as great as its next aspiration. And a movement like the Zionist movement is as great as its next aspiration. And unless we articulate that much better than we have so far, that pace of erosion, I think, will continue. And I'm going to have a harder time convincing Shira to have a shiver down her spine. Thank you.